Welcome to Conversations. My guest today is David Herrera. David Herrera is from Billings, or works out of Billings, I should say. He's the chief contractor for HIV interventions in the state, I believe. Is that correct?
For men having sex with men, for gay and bisexual men,
right.
And that type of outreach.
Mm-hmm. We've tried in other shows to give a bit of a picture of how the HIV process goes. We've had the lady from the CDC, we've had locally the head of the Missoula AIDS Council, and you're a very big player in the state, and you're someone I've been wanting to have on.
Thank you.
Basically, it goes, the CDC wants to give money to the states to prevent HIV. Then the health department passes it on down, but some of it keeps and does other things that are statewide, and good share of that goes to you, right?
Well, I think this...
that makes it sound, it doesn't go into your pocket. You have...
It's about, well, out of $1 million contract is what the state of Montana receives. Right. And FDH and Associates, which is my organization, we receive about $90,000. So...
Now that tops out any of the counties in the state.
It's, yeah, certainly I think Missoula and Billings are the next, or I'm not sure how much Missoula receives and how much Billings, but it's up there when you include, they receive also funding for community planning as well, so that gets added too. And
the reason you get more money is that you are doing things all across the state.
Right.
Now, in order to do that, you have founded the, what is it?
The Montana Gay Men's Task Force.
Right, the Montana Gay Men's Task Force. And FDH, what,
FDH and Associates, and basically that's just sort of the contracting sort of organization and that the state contracts with, and then through that, then I coordinate the Montana Gay Men's Task Force, and which is a group of guys from across the state, and we meet 4 times a year, and basically to do planning, developing, some implementation of activities and interventions targeting the highest risk group for HIV in Montana.
One of the big things you do are the retreats. I should say that it was a retreat that I went to that you had set up that really got me going and activated, and started thinking about, you know, speaking about the fact that I was HIV positive in the community, and really got me going. So to the extent that I've been successful in building a community, it all reflects on you and that activity. At that time, those were the only retreats, weren't they? The HIV positive retreats?
Right, and I think it's just sort of, there might have been maybe one other retreat, a gay men's retreat, but it really is, has been one of the goals, is to have those retreats almost be part of some type of community building, because as you know, for a lot of men living in Montana, it's pretty isolating, and guys talk about how they feel they're the only gay person in their community, they don't know anybody, and to actually then come to some sort of statewide event where they can feel connected and meet other people and realize that they're not alone is part of, I think, how you help maintain a healthy lifestyle and build healthy communities. And certainly that's one of the biggest barriers that we have is a sense of isolation that people feel.
Well, we might say that the one thing that people are pretty sure about, that at least in the United States, that can prevent AIDS is building a stronger gay community, because gay people for a long time have lived kind of in a shadow world or whatever, isolated in some cases, and especially in rural places, that isolation, you may be the only gay person in town in a place like Glasgow, or that you're aware of,
right,
or some such thing. And so it is money well spent, I think, in preventing AIDS if the people who are most prone to get it are focused on becoming more healthy and more aware of the choices they have to make. Let's take one of these retreats. What is typical? What happens?
usually the task force, we get together and form a planning committee for the retreat, and then identify kind of what the theme will be, what some of the workshops, and a lot of the stuff that we take is really from suggestions that participants have made from other retreats and stuff like that. You know, they'd like to see a workshop on relationships or on intimacy, or how do you disclose or how do you bring up HIV status, things like that. We also then look at from conferences that we attend to. I just attended the National Gay Men's Health Summit last week, and so there's a lot of great ideas and a lot of work that's going on across the country, and we certainly try and get ideas that way and bring them to these retreats. And we also identify presenters. We've been really fortunate here in Montana to have some great individuals. We have now a physician who's gay and is part of the task force and is able to has just brought a whole new dimension as far as being able to answer questions about health and kind of the questions that you always wanted to ask your physician, but you weren't able to. And that's one of the things that we're really trying to work on is with the healthcare workers and getting people more comfortable about the issue of recognizing that they have gay and lesbian patients, and that in some cases the needs are going to be different, and you need to be talking about what are the risks that a person might be engaging in, or to say that if a person is having problems with, say, substance abuse, and to not think that maybe their sexual orientation has anything to do with that, I think is sort of an oversight that people tend to make. So,
You know, that lady I was talking to as you came in, I believe, works for Turning Point, and we were talking about the connections that, you know, get drunk, use drugs, can lead to unsafe sex and can lead to HIV. HIV can lead to depression and drinking and using drugs, and that
right.
a lot of these issues are intimately connected. You also do surveys, and we use those in the planning committee on the state and on the local level. How do you accomplish that, go about it? Where are they taken, for instance?
That's something that we've started to do. Probably, I think this is about the 6th year now that we've been surveying the gay and bisexual men's community here in Montana, and I don't think it's probably not I don't think I could say that it's a representative sample necessarily. It's probably a representative sample of men that are out and that are probably self-identify as such. Because as we know, there's a lot of men that do not identify as gay or bisexual and yet are engaging in the same type of behaviors. But we kind of sort of kick off the survey every year at the annual Pride Weekend celebration that occurs in different communities. This year it was held in Helena. And then we kind of go for about 2 months, and the outreach workers and task force members go into their communities and basically take the surveys and have guys fill them out, and they collect them, and then they get turned into me, and the person then compiles them. And so we have a goal this year of trying to get about 200, and I think we're going to get 200 men surveyed, and it's a great tool. We have really expanded from just asking questions about HIV to now asking questions about general health. For instance, we are now asking questions as far as how many men, if they've had concerns over the last year on other health concerns such as depression or anxiety or sexual compulsion, domestic violence, those type of issues as well. And it's really concerning to hear that it's like over 50% of the men have had concerns of depression. And this year we're actually following that up with if they've received any treatment for stuff like that. And I think I just read just this week that the Millennium, or the National March on Washington, the Gay and Lesbian March that was held, I think, a couple months ago, KY Lubricants, they did a survey of 2,500 men and women, gays and lesbians and found that the #1 health concern was depression and mental health issues. So, so I think it's something that we need to begin to look at and to really address. I think especially in rural states like Montana.
It touches a lot of lives. And, I've often thought that we should do some kind of seminar or whatever, at least locally, and I'm glad to hear that you're thinking along lines for the state, because it is a big problem for all kinds of people. You also do outreach work where you hire people in communities to do certain types of things. What would an outreach worker do?
I have a couple of guys that are actually going out and talking to men, doing outreach in places like adult bookstores, again, where a lot of men don't self-identify, and yet are engaging in risk behaviors, engaging in sex. And so just sort of talking, making sure that condoms are available. A lot of places like that, they have condoms, but you have to buy them. And so this is a way of at least ensuring that if somebody wants condoms, if they need information, that they can get them. A lot of bookstores have actually been very good about letting us provide information, brochures, information like that, as far as so that for people know that where they can go to get information. Doing sort of house parties of discussion groups, safer sex workshops in their communities, really serving as referrals, letting them for the community as far as where they can go to get tested. I did something here in Missoula and helped sponsor the this private public acts, or it was like a theater group, and they would go into bars and stuff and actually do kind of a theater, HIV theater in these bars and stuff, which is a great idea, and I would love to do more of, because I think it's another venue and way to innovative way to really get information out to people in places that they may not expect to get it. So
I hear the guy who did those is back in town. I don't know whether he'd be interested in carrying on any of that work, but
oh wow,
he's a real fire breather.
Mm-hmm.
Now you also say you're a figure in gay politics, if there is such a thing, in the sense that you're aware of what's going on in the States, you give advice, you put people in touch with people, you travel a lot. Can you speak to some of that, those things, besides what we've talked about already, that you are involved in?
And as far as the politics, probably, I mean, I was involved in the formation of Pride, the statewide gay and lesbian organization, was on the founding board, was actually founding co-chair with Diane Sands, who again has been one of my heroes and mentors, especially with politics and the public policy arena, not only here in Montana but nationally. And so that was a great experience to finally have, I think, an organization, because it grew out of just sort of a void of not having a voice up at the legislature when legislators were talking about trying to get the felony, the same-sex being a felony in Montana, trying to get that overturned, and we really felt that we couldn't have legislators speaking for us. It needed to be gays and lesbians speaking for themselves, and that was certainly the impetus for that type of organization, and which has grown, and that has really been their focus on kind of trying to secure the constitutional rights for lesbians, bisexuals, gay men, transgendered individuals, and it's my focus is now really moved as far as public policy towards gay men's health issues, and I think trying to be involved on realizing that HIV is not the only health concern for gay men, that there are other health issues, like I mentioned, depression, there's other diseases, genital warts, the human papillomavirus, HPV, which we know in women, a couple of strains can lead to cervical cancer, and now we know that the same strains can lead into anal cancer for gay men, and the need for having pap smears for both men and women becomes a necessity. And and that's something that's a lot of people don't know about. Certainly there's changes that need to occur within the healthcare establishment of being made aware of some of these health issues that are relevant to gay men. So that's the type of stuff that I find really exciting, trying to advocate for different types of protection like spermicides and microbicides that can offer some barriers for protection against not only HIV but other sexually transmitted diseases, so that we don't have to rely solely on condoms, which you know, it's still difficult getting men to use them and to wear them. So
I'm glad to hear you talking along these lines. Brant and I have talked very much that perhaps we need not to downplay AIDS, but to make it part, or to realize that it's part of a whole series of types of behavior, of things that can happen with those behaviors. And I was saying the other day, they were talking about hepatitis C being a marker for AIDS, that if you do the kind of behavior that gives you hepatitis C, then we know people are doing the kinds of behavior that could lead to HIV infection. And I said, well, you know, it's nice that that's a marker, but, you know, we should also be trying to prevent. We don't want people getting hepatitis C any more than we want them getting AIDS. And that, especially when we're educating people, that perhaps now is the time to start educating people about all the things that they could get from these behaviors. You and I have not differed, but you, of course, in your position are strongly connected with working with gay men. I am starting to feel that maybe prevention should work with kids at a younger level before they even identify as gay and straight, and that doesn't mean that both those things shouldn't be addressed.
Right.
Except there's only a certain amount of money. And do you have a comment on that?
Well, and like I said, I think, like you said, I don't know that one should be sacrificed at the expense of another. At the same time, I think we need to realize sort of where the threat, or where the more immediate threat lies, and it's kind of like, from my focus, I see the higher numbers of HIV that we know are within Montana's gay community, and national reports continue to report that it's the highest population at risk. In fact, younger gay men we're seeing the highest increase in HIV among younger gay men, and so that the threat is very real, and compared to where we haven't, I think the threat is there for youth as well, but we haven't seen the same prevalence, certainly within that population, that we see for gay men. And again, when we talk about limited federal dollars, I think that it's going to be sort of, we know that the CDC and agencies recognize that, yes, gay men are a high priority and we need to channel funds that way. It's going to be much easier to advocate, say, for private funding for youth than it would be to advocate for private funding for gay men's health issues. I mean, I would be probably hard-pressed to find how many United Way agencies are willing to fund some outreach program for men having sex with men as opposed to programs targeting youth. I think that there's a lot of other resources available, and for to do some really good risk reduction outreach for youth here in Montana. In fact, that's one of the priorities, I think, that the governor has laid out as far as kind of reducing the risks, not only around substance use, but other risk-taking behaviors that youth engage in. And so there's a big, I think, push right now and a lot of resources available. And so my concern becomes, given these federal dollars, then and then all these other resources available for youth, do we want to then continue to take more and more away when we know that there might be other resources out there where we can be doing the same work for youth, and yet those same resources may not exist for outreach for gay men. And so that's just stuff that I think we kind of need to look at whenever we begin making those type of decisions, and but not to, I don't think, to not sacrifice one for the other, but to just not forget about that. Because I think there's a lot of apathy that people think, well, we don't need to be doing anything more for gay men because we've already, if they don't know by now how to prevent it, then they're never going to figure it out. And it's easy then to kind of write off populations, especially that are for the most part marginalized, just like injection drug use as well. It's kind of easy to write off those type of populations, and that's what I get concerned about, making sure that these populations that maybe don't have people advocating for them don't get written off.
Well, I certainly don't think that we should write off populations that need addressing. It just seems so frustrating to me that here we are, what, 30 years? No, we're not that far into 80.
It's about
20-some years, or we're
20
well
years.
over 2 decades into the infection, and you get young kids coming along who don't know somehow, and it seems so frustrating to have to retrain them all the time. And it seems to me that if we tried to create a healthier society in which young gay men could grow up healthy and make those choices, that we could kind of prevent some of this at an earlier age. And I don't know.
So I agree completely. I think that one of the things that needs to happen in this country is we need a comprehensive sexual health program that starts at a very early age, you know, in elementary, you know, and that you can start. I mean, that's what they do in Europe, and again, in some of the countries, you see you don't see the high rates of STDs, the high rates of pregnancy that you see here in the United States, and a lot of that, I think, is attributed to, you know, the freedom and being able to talk about sexual and health issues is not a big deal. And it's interesting, I was talking to somebody who actually had traveled to Europe, and we talk about how youth here in the United States go to parties and are drinking, and they kind of drink in order to have sex. So there's a correlation. In Europe, there is no correlation between alcohol, and the youth would not think about getting drunk in order to have sex. That's not something that they would make that connection. So it's really interesting, kind of the differences.
Just as a sidebar to that, my parents were over there, and at least where they were, and you know, can't speak for the whole continent, but if you start drinking, that's it. You just don't drive. I mean, it has become so thoroughly ingrained, and they seem to handle that issue better. It's kind of interesting. People are starting to admit now, or at least say, and you're hearing it out loud, that if you're heterosexual in Montana, you really aren't at that great a risk. Now, some people don't like to have that said, but I think it feeds into what you're saying about the gay population. That is really where most of the HIV is located in this state, and there is a strong justification for putting money there. And I don't mean to deny that at all.
Right. It's just, again, it's like sort of looking at numbers, and there are people that have much more advanced degrees than I do, and that much better job, but that's their job, and that's what they look at, and they can kind of take what an epidemic is doing and figure out, okay, based on these numbers, this is what's going to happen, and kind of develop some trends. And certainly looking at the trends here in Montana, we, I think, have been concerned and always wondered, well, when will HIV then truly enter the heterosexual, you know, community? In fact, we've been wondering about that as far as nationally, and it really hasn't happened. I mean, where it's happened has been within communities of color and injection drug use communities, and having HIV being transmitted heterosexually that way, but because one of the partners, you know, may or have been sharing needles. So it's kind of, It's hard to say. I mean, I think that certainly if a person is engaging in unprotected sex or sharing needles with somebody, then the risk is always there. And how real that risk is, I think, becomes based on then how prevalent the virus is within that certain population. And certainly what we know what's going on in Africa, I mean, where it's just frightening to see the prevalence of HIV within the community at large. And so the likelihood of having sex or sharing needles and becoming infected is very real.
Well, there it's just almost the opposite.
Exactly.
If you're having heterosexual sex there, you're really in big trouble. If you're having homosexual sex, you're safer there. David, could you give us just a little bit of bio of how you wound up doing this? And
How I wound up, I don't
you
even...
didn't. This was not a goal as a
into
little
it.
boy that you had to.
No, I think I happened to be in the Bay Area. I was doing my undergraduate work at Stanford. Got there in 1981, right as the whole HIV was occurring. I mean, that's when the virus was, things were happening in San Francisco and in Los Angeles, where this weird cancer at that time, you know, this gay cancer that people didn't know what was going on, came onto the scene. And so certainly, I think hearing about it in the Bay Area and being gay myself and reading about what was actually going on and learning more sparked my interest. And I guess I was really struck by, as the disease developed and people started to get really sick, and I was just struck by the inhumanity and the gross acts of discrimination that were occurring. I mean, to hear stories of ambulance drivers in San Francisco that, you know, would get to a person's house and see, of course, at that time, you know, you had Kaposi sarcoma, which was a type of cancer characterized by purple splotches, and so they'd see somebody, the patient with that, and said, "Oh my gosh, this person has AIDS," and they would just drive off and wouldn't even bother to pick up the person that needed to get to the hospital. So, I mean, those things, those type of incidents you've heard about and were very real, and so I think that certainly fueled, I think, my passion as far as wanting to be involved and realize that that could be me, and what do I need to do in order to make sure that that doesn't happen. And then moving here to Montana in the 1984, realizing there wasn't a whole lot being done, although there was a handful of people here in Missoula and in Billings that were already laying the groundwork for the development of the Missoula AIDS Council and the Billings, the Yellowstone AIDS Project. So it was easy to then kind of get involved, bring my experience from the Bay Area in California, and it just has grown from there. So it's been really an honor to kind of see the development, how much we've grown here in Montana, and the progression and that we've been able to make. And I think because of that, we've managed to, I think, keep the numbers low as a result of really doing something when there weren't even any AIDS cases reported at the time. But of course now we know that we do have.
If you had a wish list and we gave you another $1 million or doubled your budget, which wouldn't even be near $1 million, what would you like to see done? Do you have any projects that you can't afford but would love to have, or are planning to do but haven't realized yet?
It's interesting because that same question was given to groups at this summit, the Gay Men's Health Summit, and people were asked, if you had $1 million, how would you spend it? And I think probably I would ensure that you know, there were funds that went to mental health, and I would use those funds probably in a more holistic way, and probably not want them all to go solely to HIV, but to, again, as we talked about, other health care issues that they're certainly related to HIV. You know, substance abuse, I think, is a big concern here in our community here in Montana, and in some way it does play a role in people taking risks and making them susceptible to HIV and other diseases. So, you know, I'd probably look at what are kind of the high priority needs here for our state and ensure that we funded those, and whether that meant developing or putting money towards existing agencies or organizations that are already providing those services, and just expanding for gays, gay men and lesbians, or creating them, you know, from scratch. But I'd hope that we'd have enough agencies already that it'd just be a matter of just shifting the focus just a little bit.
Well, you were out of town last week
Mm-hmm.
in Boulder, Colorado. I was out of town last week for the state planning group.
In Billings.
Yes, and you were sorely missed, and I think you had the more fun of the two. But we had sort of decided that we might swap some of the insights we got from both of those events that we attended. Would you like to go first with something that you came away with?
Yeah, there were different, God, there was just so much that was being offered, and again, what was neat is to go to a conference and not have HIV be the predominant issue. And one of the institutes before the conference that I attended was an institute called Manifest Love, and it's basically a movement that is trying to get gay men to realize and address some of the isolation, the competition, the attitude, kind of in different communities where, why is it that so many gay men get caught up in that you have to look a certain way, you have to act a certain way, that your life should, you know, focus around the bars and the club scene, and if you aren't at the right dance club, then there's something wrong, or if you're not wearing the right clothing, then you're not a true gay man. Or there's just a lot of that leads to a lot of isolation, a lot of focus on just sex as opposed to intimacy, or as opposed to friendships, and it's just it was a fascinating institute to kind of to hear about some of the stuff that, as far as cultures that gay men have created, as far as never in the history of have we seen men, as far as become involved in like service agencies or volunteer at the same rates that gay men have, compared to when you compare it to heterosexual men. And certainly, you know, HIV had a big role as far as, you know, people like myself getting involved in volunteering or trying to do something, but you don't you know, necessarily hear about that, or the fact that you go to the different bars and stuff and you don't really hear too much about the violence, or that there's all these fights that break out in you know, gay clubs or anything like that, as opposed to you know, where you talk to my straight friends and stuff, and that, yeah, they've been to bars and stuff, and where guys end up getting into fights and stuff, but as far as like a lot of violence, that doesn't really occur, public, you know, violence doesn't really occur necessarily to the same degree. Now, I would preface that, I mean, I think that doesn't say that domestic violence doesn't occur within the gay community, because that does, but that tends to be, again, more private, as opposed to, you don't see, like in these different marches and stuff, gay men fighting or getting, you know, starting fighting with protesters or stuff like that. That isn't necessarily, at least none of the protests or the marches that I've been to, I've never seen that. I don't know
Once we're accepted in the mainstream, we can start fighting.
But it just was very interesting, kind of, that was one of the institutes as far as wanting to build a culture that where men can love one another, can build friendships, and to kind of begin to address sort of some of the competitiveness, the isolation that maybe people, feel, and just to aspire to the best that we can be, and which is interesting. Other workshops, I attended just kind of looking at different programs, other models that worked. In Delaware, they do a gay men's health conference one day, and certainly that's one of the things that I would like to be able to do here in Montana, is to develop a type of a health conference for gay men, possibly also for lesbians. And I've been talking to Pride about that, and that's something that that we're really interested in bringing to our state. Different workshops. I went to one on oral sex, and is there anything new? And luckily, there isn't any. The information hasn't changed as far as the risk, and I think everything that we've been saying remains the same. And not to say that there isn't any risk, but certainly it's a much lower risk than unprotected vaginal or anal sex. And so, but those are just some of the different types of workshops on holistic, on mental health, and we had a great representation. There were about 10 of us from Montana that attended. I think we had more people from Montana than probably any other state, barring like Colorado. So I was really felt good about that.
I was, as I say, at the SPG, and they didn't teach me so much, but I learned a lot this time. I'm starting to realize that people are human, which I should have learned a long time ago, and that institutions are human, and that that's all we've got, I'm afraid. At times I've found the whole planning thing for HIV boring. Sometimes there's money that's wasted. Sometimes you get a few dim bulbs in there. You wish you had someone else. And yet, it's the only game in town. And that really came home clear to me as I listened to people and talked to people. And I didn't go to sleep under the table this time. I should add. But one of the insights I found is that the different RACs, the regional advisory committees, mean different things in different places. I realized that in some of these small towns and small counties where they've never had an AIDS gaze, or they've had one or two, that having this focus of HIV to work around is kind of a core group of liberalism in these small places. It's a chance for straight people to say they care, and they party, and they really take it seriously, and they do HIV prevention on drink coasters. And when it came time to report on what we did up here, I had to say that, most of us have something better to do in Missoula. We all have activities that we think probably do more good, and we're way ahead. And my point is that, yes, we are, and yes, they are, and that the process isn't perfect, the Army isn't perfect, the church isn't perfect, no institution you could name, and that I think we do a pretty darn good job with what we have here. Especially seeing Wyoming. Wyoming has been out of compliance for 6 years, and I was sitting at a table with 3 co-chairs, and they didn't have a counterpart. They were co-chairs, but there was no other co, and so we're light years ahead of some other places in this country, and it made me kind of proud of what we've done here.
Right. I think it's sometimes we tend to forget just how big Montana is, and how diverse, and just the differences, the different communities, and that trying to do outreach in a small little town like Sidney, Montana, or Glasgow is going to look very different than doing outreach in Billings or in Missoula. And I think that we have to really take all of that into account, and appreciate that the bottom line is ensuring that the work gets done, and that the whole purpose to community planning is trying to save lives, and that's kind of what the work has to be about. So
I want to ask you also, the Missoula AIDS Council got a grant, and that was what we couldn't talk about when Nikki Economo was on the show, but we can now, I guess. It's going to kind of put Missoula on the map.
absolutely.
You know, where
It
there's
was-
money, there's power and interest and all those things. So we will be giving out money to other parts of the state. Now, how are you going to be involved in that?
Well, it's incredible. I think it'll put Montana on the map as well, and I think it was a highly competitive process, and I think the Missoula AIDS Council is the lead agency as a part of a coalition of other community-based organizations. And the project that was funded, it's an outreach program targeted for men having sex with men and injection drug users. And we're going to be doing outreach, primarily street outreach and also bar outreach, because it's kind of addressing substance abuse within those two communities. And in 5 different communities plus 2 reservations. And my role will be as a consultant in helping to develop protocols and what the program will look like for at least the gay and bisexual and men having sex with men portion of the outreach. And then we have another consultant, Vicki Peterson, who will then be handling the injection drug use protocols, and because those, the outreach, while there may be some overlap, it's going to look very different for those 2 different communities. So it's exciting, and it's great that it's a 4-year program, and it definitely is going to put Montana on the map. And so,
How's that process going?
good.
Of course, anything like this, there are going to be conflicts and insecurities. People get stepped on. Generally, though, you think this is?
I think we're really fortunate. I mean, here in Montana, in other states, coalition building is a foreign concept, and yet here in Montana, because of the huge, the geographic nature of the state and the so few people doing the work, coalition. I mean, this is what we've been doing. Anybody working in sort of progressive institutions knows about coalition building. There's no other way to do the work, and certainly that's kind of characterizes the history of HIV here in Montana. I mean, the Missoula AIDS Council, the Olson AIDS Project, Butte Support Services, Lewis and Clark AIDS Project, all these different agencies, and we all have a history of working together for years. And so I think in a lot of ways this was just a natural progression. And I think, so I feel really good about the different, the work that we've laid, and the work that I have no doubt that we can do the work. And I think we have a great crew of organizations and people involved, and so I'm really looking forward to it.
One of the things that I find I distrust money. I mean, it makes me uncomfortable having it. It makes me uncomfortable other people having it. It does corrupt, it changes things. There are those people who, when I talk like that, start saying that for the gay movement, having money is a sign of arrival of some sort, or that there are those who think only money makes you really noticed. Do you have any thoughts on that? I'm not so sure that I really am thrilled with all of our HIV activities and getting funding behind them, and yet there is something to be said for the fact that it's proof that your community has come into its own. And
yeah, I mean, I think that certainly with HIV, I think a lot of the work could not have been done without volunteers, and I think for the most part it's probably volunteers who've done more work as far as meeting the needs and doing the work that needed to be done, as far as prevention or as far as care services. I mean, people delivering meals, people, doing laundry or doing stuff like that. I mean, that for the most part was all done by volunteers. I don't know that a whole lot of people ever got paid for it, and certainly I hope that that continues to be an integral part of any of the work that we do here in Montana, and because it's really important. I guess in the position that I'm in, I guess as far as the planning, the administration, the looking at the different needs that we have to, I'm always looking at how much more can be done, and here's another project or another program that I would love to see happen, and how do we make that happen? And unfortunately, a lot of it's not going to happen just with volunteers. You need people with the expertise, with the talent, with the skills and abilities that can come in and help build those programs, help put them together, and hopefully then create something that will continue. And then there are some very real needs that people have that need to be met, and so a lot of that takes money. I also get concerned, I guess, trying to figure out, okay, is the money really going to where it needs to be going? And I'm a really strong believer when I see money just being used solely for administration and not actually going down to the people that it needs to be, to the populations that it needs to be serving, then I think that's when we need to start yelling and saying, wait a minute, something's wrong here. And that's another thing that I feel good about as part of the history of HIV services in this country is we've had groups like ACT UP, advocates for people with HIV, for prevention, for communities of color, and that have really been vocal when something like that has occurred. And I think it's really important. It keeps these programs and these agencies honest and accountable, and I think which is something that always needs to happen, because it's so easy for agencies to become complacent and to be satisfied with the status quo and to just continue to do things as they've been doing them. But one thing that I've learned certainly with HIV is it doesn't allow you to do that, because it's constantly changing, and the minute you get complacent is the minute that you lose sight of the real work that needs to occur.
We've brought up volunteers several times here in the show. One of the things that I find really wonderful is that we've gone in the last number of years from a situation where it was mainly heterosexual women who were doing this work, and more we're getting gay men. And there was a reason for that. AIDS was quite a blow. It was debilitating, and people were scared and didn't know what to do. And now we're seeing more and more gay men standing up, becoming part of things, volunteering. If there are people out there who would like to get involved in this, and I don't mean that they should necessarily be gay men, what are some of the things that they can do around the state? Who can they give input to? I know locally they can call the Missoula AIDS Council.
Right. Again, contact the local community-based organization, the community. They can contact me. I have a toll-free number, and that's 1-888-713-4683, and I can help get them connected. They can get on the mailing list. We Outspoken, which is a newspaper based out of Missoula here, which is statewide, does a really good job also of promoting different events that we host and conduct. It's another way to get involved. We have some retreats that are coming up. The Positive Men's Retreat is coming up in September, and then we have another Gay Men's Retreat that'll be in November, the first weekend in November. So, plus different workshops occurring across the state. So there's different things, ways that people get involved, and the bottom line is hopefully that there's always something that can be done. It's just kind of finding your niche. You know, what do you feel comfortable doing, and find a way to provide that talent and services.
Well, David, we'll put your number up over this at some point, and for people who are interested in going to one of these retreats, and they are, I don't know if they're totally free or.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we don't.
I remember
charge
once you said I should give you some money, and I never did.
We used to. I think there was the thought that, well, if people paid for it, then there was more value. More value might be placed, and people might be less apt to cancel at the last minute and stuff. But I sort of, I just really want to make. I don't want to put any barriers, and I want to make these events as accessible to people as possible. So.
For people who are HIV positive, I would say think about going. It's quite an experience, and to be there with other HIV positive people. David, you're an honor to the gay community. You're an honor to the state.
Likewise.
And thank you for taking time to be with us.
Thanks, Greg.
Okay.